Formatting your hard disk is one of the fundamental parts of preparing a disk to be used, and that process is called file system formatting. So when we partition a new hard disk, what we're actually doing is just dividing that disk into separate sections that we can manage separately. And we talked about partitioning in a video entitled Hard Disk Partitioning, then went into a little more depth in a video called Partition Schemes and Types. So you can go check those two videos out if you haven't seen those or if you're still a little bit fuzzy on partitioning. But once we've got all that work done, it's time now to format each partition and actually get it ready to store data. So the big question is, what exactly does the formatting do? Well, it creates a file system on the disk. And this is very similar to the old card catalogs in the library. If you remember back in the day when you'd walk into your library and they had this giant cabinet with all these little bitty drawers, and you could go in and it was all in alphabetical order. So if you were looking for a book or an author name or whatever, you could look in the appropriate drawer in the alphabetical order, and the card would tell you where on the shelves in the library to find the particular resource that you were looking for. And then you knew where to go get it. That is exactly what's happening on your hard disk. It is going to basically divide the disk up into sections. I'm going to show you a visual of that in just a moment. It's going to give every one of those sections and places an address. And then it is going to create the root directory for that file system. And this is a little area on the disk where it keeps up with all the pointers to where all the address locations are. And so it's going to do exactly what that card catalog did. Anytime something gets written to that disk, it's going to make an entry in the root directory, and then it's going to know where to go find that information for you. Now let's take a look at a visual of file system formatting. Now, this is what's happening to your disk when you format it. Notice that it is laying the disk out in these logical areas, and if you could see the electromagnetic changes that are made to the disk, this is what you would notice. Now let's start off with how it has divided your disk up like that card catalog in the library. Notice it first divided the disk into these pie-shaped sections, and these are called sectors. Notice B here is a geometrical sector. So there's a sector, one of the pie slices, if you will. Then it has divided the entire disk up into tracks. And this is like old phonograph records. And if you've ever watched one of those play with a needle, that's exactly kind of what it looks like here. It's put tracks around the disk, and you can see here is a track. And then within that track, you will notice that you have a little section of this, and this would be a sector. Then, if you'll notice right here, if we save a file and it won't fit in one of these sectors, well, it starts writing the zeros and ones across here, and then it needs a little more space, so it writes some more here, then it needs some more, and it writes maybe to here. What it's going to do then is put these entries for these sector numbers into the root directory so it knows where to find that file. This is what happens when you hear about disk defragmentation. If we started writing this file right here and then didn't have room in this contiguous sector here, we would have to have moved this sector, say, right up here. And so now when it comes time to read that file back, you can't just read across the sectors. You'd have to read this one and then move the read-write arm up to here and read this one, then move it back to here and read this one. And of course, you have to spin the disk every time to get it in position. So this is why disk defragmentation is such an irritating deal and why it slows your system down so much. But file system formatting sets up this kind of organizational structure on your disk and a lot of different ways to format that disk. Now, we obviously started off with one version. We quickly run into problems with that. And we've been upgrading, enhancing, so forth ever since based on how we're using the computers. Now, let's talk about this just a little bit. There are 3 file systems available in the Windows operating system. Now, there are other file systems out there for formatting hard disks, but these are the ones that you need to be aware of for the A+ exam. And like everything on the A+ exam, I would strongly encourage you, when you have some spare time, go out there and read a little bit more about each one of those. It's pretty fascinating. We're going to talk about the FAT file system, the FAT32 file system, and the NTFS file system, and I may throw one more at you just for your information. Join me in part 2, and we'll dig just a little deeper into each one of these and let you know what you need to understand about these for the exam.